All right, what's going on, Giants fans? Making a video. The Giants made their offensive line coaching hire in Rob Sale, University of Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns. Before we get into it, because I don't do these types of videos a ton in the offseason, we more focus on the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot of content coming out, draft videos. I got like a 30-minute Chaz rap video coming out later this week, and I think it might end up being my best draft video of the offseason, so you get to look forward to that. But the Giants hire Rob Sale as their offensive line coach. He's 41 years old. Giants obviously, had their issues with Mark Colombo, who was fired mid-season. Then Dave DeGuglielmo wasn't retained and actually went to Louisiana Tech. It seemed like he kind of wanted something a little more long-term and stable, because, they were trying to bring him back. But I also heard some of the offensive linemen weren't the biggest fan of Gooch, but that also doesn't mean he's a bad coach or anything. I actually like Gooch regardless. He played some college ball, played at LSU. Started at both guard spots, center from 98 to 2002. He is a Louisiana guy. In fact, his dad owns a Louisiana, a LSU merchandise store. He got his connection with Joe Judge. Joe Judge talks a lot about connections. He's like, hey, he was talking about with other head coaching hirings around the NFL this year. He's like, hey, it's important to get guys that you know and can trust. He was with Alabama from 2007 to 2011 as a strength and conditioning coach and an offensive assistant. Obviously, we know Joe Judge was at Alabama from 2009 to 2011. So that's where that connection comes from. And then from 2012 to 2014, he was at McNeese State. He was the O-line coach the first 2 years and then the offensive coordinator the last year. And then he moved to Georgia. He got the O-line coaching job at Georgia with Mark Richt in 2015. Mark Richt was fired that year, so he moved on. He moved on to Louisiana Monroe as the O-line coach that next year. And then he goes to Arizona State as the O-line coach / run game coordinator under the offensive coordinator at the time, Billy Napier. But then Billy Napier gets the O-line coach at University of Louisiana Rajin Cajuns. And that's where he's ended up the last year as the O-line coach and the offensive coordinator. So, people say he's a really good developer of talent. Duke Mayweather, Brandon Thorne, who, those are the guys I look to for O-line content. You guys know I love the O-line. I do the O-line reports. Those are two guys I look to for tips about the offensive line. They both love their guy and say he's a good developer of talent. And, this last season there was a track record of that. There was two of his guys who were drafted in the 2020 draft. You had Kevin Dotson to the Steelers in the 4th round. And then in the 2nd round, you had Robert Hunt of the Dolphins. So you do have two guys who, were drafted by this guy from his offensive line with the Ragin' Cajuns. So there's that. And then I was looking at Robert Hunt's Twitter. He loves the guy. He was pumped for him. So it's good to see that past players like him, where, with just because someone may have been a good coach doesn't mean players always like you. So it's good to see some past players like him from their time with the Ragin' Cajuns. He was the OC this past year. The Ragin' Cajuns went 10-1. He was offensive coordinator, 33 points per game, 213 rushing yards per game on 5.5 yards per carry. Passing yards, 209 per game, 7.4 yards per attempt, and then 19 sacks in 11 games. The previous season, they averaged 38 points per game, went 11-3 that season, 257 rushing yards per game, 6.3 yards per attempt. Passing-wise, a lot better, 336 yards per game, 8.02 yards per attempt. But they had 33 sacks in 14 games. So the sack numbers aren't great. The sack numbers, there's no beating around the bush. They aren't great. And the Giants, who were, top of the league in sacks in 2020, that doesn't look great. But I also am going to actually watch some film, and sacks don't tell the whole story just looking at the sack number, especially in college football. In the NFL, it probably does a better job of that. But in college, your QB could be inept. He could be afraid to throw the ball. He could be a guy that scrambles around for, a million years. So I'm going to try and watch some film to see what his philosophy is. And we're trying to get an interview for the podcast. It's not the easiest thing to do because there's not a ton of people covering the Ragin' Cajuns. I like to hire, and it's hard to judge position coaches, especially when they don't have a huge track record or a bunch of media availability. One of the first things I go to do is look at interviews, on YouTube. His most recent ones were with Georgia in 2015, and the audio is not great. So I wasn't able to get a ton out of him from that. But like I said, I mean, Duke Mayweather and Brandon Thorne like those guys, and I trust them. And they're not. I don't think they're just saying every O line coach is good. So, and if development is the key, and Joe Judge continues to hire college coaches, which is a move I really do like. Like I like the idea of hiring college coaches because something Joe Judge emphasizes is teachers. College coaches are probably more teachers than NFL coaches are. They obviously become NFL coaches, and this is a young offensive line. You got Andrew Thomas entering year 2. You got Shane Lemieux entering year 2. It only started half the season. You got Nick Gates, who, super impressed with, but this is, his year 2 as a full-time starter, year 2 as a center position. Obviously, Sale has some, experience himself at the center position, so maybe that could work out well. Kevin Zeitler, we don't know what's going to happen with Zeitler. Like, he may not be here. I don't want to move on from Zeitler because I don't think we're an offensive line where we can get rid of a good player. But you never know what's going to happen. Will Hernandez, what's the deal with him? We don't know what the deal with him is. Right tackle is maybe the biggest question mark on the Giants team right now. Do they bring back Cam Fleming? Do they trust Matt Parrott to make that jump in year 2, or do they go in the draft or free agency? Like that's a big question mark right now. And Rob Sale is going to be tasked with developing that group, man. So interested to see some of the philosophies. The podcast we have out tomorrow morning, we will have more information on them. I've been asking around trying to get stuff out of him, just philosophy wise. I'm not like, is he a good coach? Just philosophy stuff. It seems like at with the Ragin' Cajuns, they like to run the ball a ton. It'll be interesting to see what kind of run schemes he ran and if they're similar to what the Giants did, which the Giants did a revamp of their run game. Probably around week 6, week 7. It really did seem like Joe Judge added some of his run philosophies compared to the Jason Garrett just zone run scheme and not block. Where Garrett wasn't blocking guys on the backside, and it seemed like they just took overhauled their run game where they're like, hey, we're gonna do more true double teams, we're gonna do more pulls, we're gonna do more misdirection, which So listen, I think this Giants offensive line is young, and I think it does have a lot of potential. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Andrew Thomas. I think Will Hernandez, I still think he can be a really good, a good offensive lineman in the NFL. Gates, you guys know I love him. Lemieux had some issues, but you know what? That was to be expected his rookie year. Like, he's a guy that can develop. He puts the work, and he could do it. Matt Parrott has all the tools. Again, is he a guy that's going to develop, or is he going to stay, around what he is? So I do think this is an offensive line that wasn't good in 2020, but I think it has a lot of potential going forward. So it'll be interesting to see. Hope to find out more about Rob Sale going forward. Interested to see the first O-line report of 2021. Man, watching the Super Bowl and now that we don't have football, I am really craving to be back in the game where, it was nice to have a couple weeks off of Giants football. I'm really craving it right now. So interested. Can't wait to do that type of stuff. So gonna go watch some film, try and figure out some information on the guy. And you know what? Here, let me see if I got anything. Do I got anything on it? I sent some DMs before this video. Let's see if I got anything back. Make sure to subscribe, like I asked you guys to do that in the beginning. Anything back? No freaking DMs. All right, appreciate you guys. Let's go Big Blue. Podcast out tomorrow. Bleeding Blue tonight. Check that out. Bleeding Blue. At 6 o'clock. I'm loving what Justin and Snacks are doing with that. So appreciate you guys. Let's go Big Blue.